I want to bring up something that we haven't talked about yet, and that is I could probably talk for 5 or 10 minutes about every single act and thing that is slowly chipping away at each one of our rights in the Bill of Rights. The TSA, the NDAA, on and on and on. Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act. What is your view on these acts? I'm not going to call them laws because they're not. And what can you do to help us?
Let's talk about the NDAA. That particular provision you're talking about that suspends our rights as U.S. citizens had no place in the National Defense Authorization Act. It should have been stripped out.
Right.
Okay, it should have been stripped out. But the fear was, well, we can't. We vote against that. We vote against, funding the military. Well, no, you don't. You strip that provision out. It's cowardly. You can't have that. If it's a National Defense Authorization Act, but you have something in the bill that has nothing to do with national defense, it shouldn't be there.
There's an awful lot of stuff in the NDAA that shouldn't be there.
But that's probably the most blatant example.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be there.
So let me give you a situation. This is there have been situations with our current congressman for CD5 before the CD9 change takes place, where there have been bills to vote on that have some good stuff and some bad stuff, and the vote was taken for the bill because I believe that the bad stuff, is outweighed by the good stuff. What do you do?
The good stuff outweighs the bad stuff.
Or yeah.
No, you take it out. Hey, look.
And if you can't take it out, what do you do?
Back in this National Defense Authorization Act, I over 30 years in the military. I'm a combat veteran. If I vote against that because this doesn't belong, I'm gonna make the biggest stink I can make. I might have some credibility. I'm not voting against funding our troops or doing what we have to do to keep these guys safe. I'm voting against this bill because no one's letting me take this thing out that has no place there. Can someone tell me why that has a place in the National Defense Authorization Act? I'll make a big stink about it. And that's the best I can do. And you know what? If I can't get it taken out, then I guess I'll have to vote against it. They can call me a traitor. They can call me a coward.
A bad Republican.
What are they going to call me?
Single item bills is one of the issues Ron Paul brings up, because what happens is that's what they do is they convolute one bill topic with a lot of other issues that you may not agree with, but the overall bill is pro-patriot, and then what happens
Like
if
the
you don't...
Patriot Act, right?
Yeah. So what happens if you don't vote for that, and unfortunately most Americans don't read the summary of the bills, so the media can use that and say, well, he's unpatriotic because he didn't do all this.
It's going to be on me and the people that elected me to help me bring attention to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Patriot Act, that's really patriotic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you aware that it was written prior to 9/11? It was written by Gary Hart. There was a Hart somebody else commission that was convened well before 9/11, and that act was ready to go. That's why it appeared so quickly.
72 hours after 9/11, it's introduced to the floor. Some
423 pages.
Yeah, 423 pages. I don't believe Congress moves that fast.
They don't. But my question is, who knew that?
Who what?
Well,
Who knew that?
Nobody knew it, but when it happens, the people that should be watching it should know.
Sure they do it.
Somebody who introduced that bill knew that they didn't write the bill. Somebody who voted on that bill said, well, this is interesting. This is record time. Where did this come from?
Right.
Why didn't people question that?
Mm-hmm.
Elected officials as well as constituents. Why did we question that?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got to look in the mirror and take responsibility for this ugly thing we're looking at.
Some people looked at it, but the media ignores that kind of looking.
All I could say is this. I'm a combat vet. I've seen some very bad things. I believe in this country. I believe in this state. Okay? And when something happens that heinous, it takes away our liberty, our freedom, and I say, I can't vote for this, I will demand a bigger and brighter stage than Ellen West gets when we talk about veterans issues. I will. Because it's wrong. And that's all I can tell you. And back to the Patriot Act, the guys who introduced the bill said, if I was in Congress, I said, wow, this is quite a comprehensive piece of work you did in the last couple of days here. No. That doesn't happen. We all know that doesn't happen. Why weren't more questions asked? You can't cower just
because of the leadership of the Congress.
Right. You can't cower because you want to belong to some club more than you want to serve the people. And that's what's happening.
And we were in we were in a state of shock. But 10 years later, my congressman still says, well, you know what? I believe that parts of that are still, quote, needed to help us stay safe.
I've talked to Sparker about that, and I think he's wrong.
I think he's very wrong.
He knows I think he's wrong. And he knows for the conversations I had with him before he was in office. Okay? So that's the best I could do then. Guess what the best I could do now? Try and get elected. Okay? State of shock, guess what? I've boxed a few times. You know, you get hit in the face, that's a state of shock. Does that mean you stop? What happens when you get punched in the face and you're not knocked out? You feel groggy, but you might back up, but you got to regroup and figure out how not to get knocked out. You're in a state of shock. But to do nothing isn't the answer. You know?
Right.
Maybe it's a terrible analogy, but the state of shock doesn't get it. Again, going back to people who introduced that bill, it was a pretty comprehensive piece of work, and in record time. Why weren't more questions asked? You know, I was actually in Stuttgart, Germany when we got bombed. That was a weird deal. Here I'm out of the country on military orders over there, and I see the Twin Towers going down. It's like a bad Bruce Willis movie.
Yeah.
We were locked down. We're in a foreign country, in a special operation command not being able to operate. We were locked down. It's just the most bizarre feeling you could ever imagine. Okay?
How do you feel about closing our bases around the world and bringing our guys home?
Should be closed. We have this great thing called an expeditionary force in the Marine Corps. And the Army did pretty well with that too, World War II.
Yeah.
Guess what? You don't pay rent on somebody else's territory.
Yeah.
Okay, it costs too much to have those bases open. So Korea is a necessary base to have. Why? Because they might get attacked. Guess what happens? A lot of dead Americans right away.
Right.
They're a speed bump.
How fast can we get over to Korea, for instance, from here? How fast can we put people over there? Pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there are some estimates. There's a flyway package that would be there in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, but more importantly, if you have this expeditionary concept the Army used to have, the Marine Corps has right now, then you're offshore. You're in a sovereign piece of U.S. territory. It's a ship.
Yeah.
Nobody owns that. The United States government. So we don't need to spend the money we're spending in Germany, in Japan. Maybe I guess Guam's a territory, so they might be okay. But we don't need to be spending that money.
Right.
And as far as the strategic and tactical significance, no.
Speaking of the sea, are you familiar with the Law of the Sea Treaty? You wouldn't have a chance to vote on it, but are you aware that there's a big push now again to get that passed to get it ratified by the Senate?
Yeah, and I think that the basic premise is we're all going to come together, these world nations, to combat pirates and all these great things. Meanwhile, we lose our ability as a component commander, as a U.S. component commander, to maneuver as we see fit.
That's not all. It gives them sovereignty. It gives them really control over what happens under, on, and over the sea.
Any navigable water.
Beg your pardon?
Any navigable water.
Any navigable water. And it also gives them taxing authority, gives the UN taxing authority over what happens in.
We need to bring those things up. I wasn't aware of the breadth of this thing, but it's not good. Anytime anybody but the United States government, I hate to say POTUS, President of the United States, loses authority to delegate to those troops, those component commanders, that's not the right answer. Our Constitution doesn't allow it. It just doesn't allow it. But there's a lot of things that have been done that the Constitution doesn't allow. We got to stop the clock, stop the problem, figure out a phased approach to fixing things. It'd be great if we did away with the Fed, but we're not going to do that without an audit. We're not going to do that without educating a lot of people. It'd be great to amend the 16th Amendment, get rid of it, and replace it with a consumption tax or fair tax. But it's going to have to happen incrementally. And I guess the fear I have, and I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but I'm not going to tell you they don't exist, multinational corporations, what's in their best interest? We don't know.
You look at how many vehicles are being manufactured by GM over in China now. It's a huge number. Is that to our benefit? No, I don't think so.
You're familiar with that term, corporatism?
Of course, it's government motored now. It's not general.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just got to take things back incrementally. It's not going to be easy. not gonna be easy, and the only thing I'm smart enough to figure out, or trying to figure out, is the biggest, the 5-meter target that's gonna kill us first is gonna be the debt. That's the spending. So that's the first thing you have to deal with. When you're training in the military environment, there's a lot of targets. A lot of things can kill you out there. But guess what? If you're so fixated with that column, that armor column coming down this road, and you don't figure out there's people in front of the armor column, they're going to shoot you first, you're going to be dead. Figure out what you need to kill first, and knock it out of the way, then deal with the other issues. Prioritize these things. The way I've seen it, I think it's a deficit spending. Along the way, we have to do things that really start writing this our ship of state. Not worry about Canada, Mexico, NATO, the UN. And part of that's a sound monetary policy. We've got to get back that. But are we going to do it with the Fed overnight, or in 2 years, or 3 years? Probably not. But if people start realizing the cause-effect nature of fiat currency and an international private bank that doesn't have our interest at heart, in fact, it's hurting us, we find out through an audit, and more people get upset about this Federal Reserve that they thought was part of the federal government. We have a person running for Congress in this district that I will do away with the Fed as a federal agency. Wow, okay. And you know what? She almost got a standing ovation. It's not an exaggeration.
That's part of the problem too.
Absolutely it's part of the problem. But again, it's education.
Yeah.
You mean the Fed isn't part of the federal government? Wow, you audit them? Wow, you mean they're really not, and they're not doing things in our best interest as Americans?
They got a sweet white building in D.C., right?
Probably more than one. That's when it's smart, right? So incrementally, we got to get there. We got to create a plan to get there.
Are you familiar with how there's a growing movement with people in high position central banks, international settlements, things like that? They're looking to back a new currency with gold. The problem is that they have all the gold, and it's almost back to the same system we have now regarding the central bank's control of money supply. And this is supposedly something that's being built up when the dollar really starts sliding off as a world reserve currency.
I'm not familiar with that. But again, things have got to happen in the light of day, and that obviously isn't one. But again, we start addressing these issues, and everyone starts looking at them. Where do they hide? Okay. These problems didn't happen in the last couple of years. So we can't fix them in a couple of years. I'm not making excuses, but I think the priorities that I would want to have, I would clearly articulate and get feedback and get some adjustment on how I think the rounds should go downrange to kill the targets. You know? Did we talk about that?
No, I was
You're a fire sport guy?
Yeah, no, I was an
Well, you know the fire sport business.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Would you vote to eliminate foreign aid?
Yeah. Well, what does it do for us? How can we
Do for the federal government or for you and me?
How about the United States?
Which one?
Yeah, how can we possibly be worried about other countries when we are borrowing money to help them out?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It goes to the heads of state anyway, into their pocket.
Okay, look, Afghanistan, when I left there, the kinetic operations were over. I dropped bombs. I called them the airstrikes, okay? But we weren't doing that because we were becoming a nicer partner in rebuilding the country. So I got to get involved in these civil affairs projects. What a joke. We'd have to tell them what road we're going to fix with our money. We compromised the mission because they knew what road we were going to fix, where we're going to be, when we're going to be there. We got shot at going in. Sometimes we got shot at working on the road. And we left. And we're helping these people out. But the bigger problem is this, and this was a report done by a professor at Marine Corps University, very highly thought of professor. For every dollar we put into a project, maybe 20% actually got to the project. The corruption, the graft. We're not going to change that, but we're still enabling it. And again, it goes back to, is our military supposed to be nation builders? The answer is no. And if we can't afford to be building their nation, why are we doing it? So no, yeah, foreign aid, very rare. Very rarely should we do that, and right now if we can't afford it, we shouldn't do it.
Are you aware that whoever the president is of Afghanistan has said that if there were a war between Pakistan and the United States, which side would you be on? Pakistan.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yes, sir. They're posh too.
And that's the guys that were over there supposedly helping.
Helping, exactly.
Yeah,
Makes a lot of sense.
Are you aware that last year, because of security we provided in that region, there's 2 big contracts let in Afghanistan? One was to China for precious and strategic metals. The other one was to Russia for gas and oil. And why could they do that? Because the United States military, which is the preponderance of force there, about 130,000 troops, over 100,000 are U.S. military troops. So don't buy this, it's a global effort. It's not, okay? But they couldn't do that. They couldn't have those mining operations, those exploration and extraction operations, if there wasn't any stability in that country. Well, who's providing stability?
We are.
So does that make sense?
No.
No.
That's the mercantilism.
Well, like you said, but who is it benefiting? Benefiting somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody's making money. off it.
Industrial, military, industrial complex, Halliburton.
But those are the questions we've got to ask. It's on everybody, okay? I mean, that's open source. That's open source. So, you know, all I can do is promise to do my best. All I can do is give you my game plan. The priorities, balanced budget amendment. Find those people who say they're for it, and let's figure out how to get this thing done. When it comes to a National Defense Authorization Act, there's provisions that make no sense in the world. Say, hey, I'm a combat vet. I support our troops. But this doesn't belong here. When it comes to the Patriot Act, okay, gee, this is interesting. Why is this being renewed? Let's revisit this thing. How on earth could this have happened? Let's revisit the origin of this thing and what was introduced, 72, whatever that was. How could this happen? Well, we need to educate more people on that. The Federal Reserve, let's audit. That's the first step to doing away with it. We've got to educate more people. It's not even popular. Look, I think you get elected with Chandler City Council or the Congress of the United States, you got to be popular enough and have the right ideas to get elected by the people once every 2 years, but I mean once. And then when you go to Congress, it's not a matter of being happy to be in the good old boys club or the club. It's not a popularity contest at that point. I think you get back to who has said what over the years, find those like-minded individuals and marry up with them and figure out where the priorities are and move forward. And right now it's got to be a balanced budget amendment. There's other things that can happen simultaneous, but again, this country didn't happen last week or last year. So we've got to figure out a game plan to be successful and move forward. I think the last thing I would say, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
The other part is I believe in congressional reform. Obamacare was very, very bad. We don't know if it's unconstitutional. We may think it is, but guess what? The Supreme Court is going to tell us what it is or it isn't.
Oh, man.
I don't.
If you want to learn about the Constitution, you don't want to go to the Supreme Court.
But Rob, the Supreme Court is going to agree on some level of constitutionality. We may not agree with it, but that's the jurisdiction that it's in.
Then we need to nullify it on the state basis.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. But my point is going to be this.
That's not in his
My
hands.
point's going to be this. If it's unconstitutional, it doesn't change one thing. Or it is constitutional, it doesn't change. If the Supreme Court says Obamacare is constitutional, it still doesn't change one thing. We can't afford it.
Right.
And then you push down the state laws, they can nullify it there. So there is remedial action that can be taken, but the facts don't change. We still can't afford it.
And you vote for any legislation that would help fund it to whatever degree, any federal funding.
Would I?
Yeah, you would not vote for any type of federal legislation to fund Obamacare, even if the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional.
No. And so the other part, before I lost my train of thought, I think I just remembered it, it's constitutional reform. Okay, Obamacare was terrible. What was just as terrible,
Congressional reform.
pardon me?
You said constitutional reform.
Congressional.
You mean congressional reform.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, but those people who got elected, most of them didn't read it.
Yeah.
They didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not excusable. The first go-around, it didn't apply to them anyway.
That's why they didn't read it.
Well, I don't know, but they still didn't read it, and it didn't apply to them. I think it's been changed to and I'm checking this, because I was told now it does apply, or the second markup put them in the program as well. Them, most of the congressmen that aren't already receiving.
So many people made us think about it that they had to be included.
Right. But think about that. Congress passes laws that don't pertain to them. That's not right.
We do it all the time.
Yeah.
But that's got to stop. That's got to stop. I think term limits are part of congressional reform. And the last thing I would say on that is, part and parcel, I'm not there for I'm taking 8 to 10 years, so unfortunately get elected. I'm not gonna take the pension. Okay, those are little things, but that's what I believe in. I'm not going there to be somebody. I'm going to try and get a job.
Well, I actually shelved my question for a minute because you just said term limits, but I mean, one of the detriments that I see to term limits is that you lose guys like Ron Paul and something like that with a term limit. And I mean, I agree that it seems like an immediate fix to be able to say, look, this is the amount of time you have to get it done, but it's almost the same to me as like a free market versus regulatory argument, because it's like, really this is an issue of like, if we put term limits in and we're saying, we're almost giving up on the citizenship of this country to be able to take grassroots efforts and say, I'm taking this back, I'm taking back your job, I'm firing it.
That's a good way to look at it, but I would say this,
Exactly.
it's not working so well. It's not working so well.
Well,
And so if you put term limits in place, whether it's 8 or 10 years, I don't know what the term is, okay? It's worth trying, because what's in place right now, nothing isn't working.
Look what we got when what's the congressman's name that's running for Congress again?
Matt Salmon.
Matt Salmon termed himself out, and look who we got, and look what his record is. Did we gain anything that way, or did we lose?
I think the way I read term limits is kind of like the military. You're not expected to stay in a rank forever. And so if you expect to move up, or you really care about your unit, guess what you do? You mentor people. You make sure that those below you understand your job and maybe get better at it. It forces us to think outside the box and think, you know what, I'm not going to get complacent. I've got 8 or 10 years to get this job done. If I really care about it, then I really need to communicate with the masses and say, this is what the job's all about.
But I wonder if perhaps I think I see your point, but I think that, the reason that I lean libertarian is that I believe libertarianism is a philosophy that advocates education. It advocates trying to educate people towards a better society and not legislate people towards a better society. And so, do you think that term limits would be more effective than, say, eliminating all of the perks that make being a congressman desirable? Or would it be better,
Why not do both? Why not do both?
Because if you get a good guy like Ron Paul in office, you wind up having to let him go.
And I love that, but for every one of him, how many other knuckleheads do we have there that have been there for 30 years?
Because of the perks, though.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, I mean,
That's the point.
Raul Grijalva, I mean,
Well,
look
the
at these
reason we
people.
have her is because the population is not educated. If we were
Yes.
educated, she wouldn't be in there.
Basically, what you're doing is you're putting the blame on the congressman because
Yeah.
of the people. Now, it's not easy. It's not easy to be to educate the people is not easy. And just like George Washington said, you need a moral, virtuous, and an educated electorate. And unfortunately, I don't know where you, as a congressman, can make any change in that. You can't go out there and teach all 600 and some odd thousand of your people what you should be paying attention to. Unfortunately, that's the drawback with having a free
Doesn't mean
society.
other people can. Fellow elected officials, like-minded congressmen can, informed citizens can.
Well, that's right.
But what I would say, look, there's no perfect solution, but I would tell you this, not having term limits hasn't worked. If I know I've got 8 to 10 years, if I'm fortunate to get elected every 2 years to get a job done, I might be more inclined to get that job done. If I don't have a period that I have to get this job done, and I start liking things, I start getting complacent, I don't really like this club. I'm just do the minimal amount of work I can to get by. That doesn't help.
You know what the flip side is? Everybody uses that time to line their pockets with as much cash.
Matt Salmon. Where
get
Matt
out.
Salmon go? And I don't dislike Matt Salmon. It's public record. When he left the Congress of the United States, who did he go to work for?
Oh man, there's a whole.
Yeah. Who was his biggest client?
I don't know offhand. But many congressional representatives, they work directly for a lot of the lobbyist companies that have been lobbying for, and then they triple, quadruple their
What makes them
salary.
more valuable when they've been in for 20 years?
Well, because of the fact that these lobby companies, these organizations, they know the system because of their experience.
Let's not let them stay in for 20 years.
Well, That's, I mean, I understand your argument, you know.
It's not a perfect solution. So all I can say is this, Robert, what we have in place right now hasn't worked so well. That's all I can say.
Well,
that's my metric.
My question, I guess, just to clarify, was which do you think would have a more immediate effect, the term limit or eliminating the perks that send people to Congress?
Why not do both?
But if you couldn't do both, and you could only do one to start, which one do you think has the more immediate effect?
Do I like my son or do I like my daughter? I can't have both.
Well,
Why not do both?
But I think that I think it really ties very closely to a conversation similar to free market economics versus regulated economics. One is legislative, and one is allowing the what am I trying to say?
I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to go on a limb because I haven't really thought about it in those terms. But I'm going to say term limits. Okay. I'm going to say term limits because it defines the time in which you're able to get a job done. You don't have 20 years to get this job done. This is the time limit you've got to get this job done.
Hey, let me throw another monkey wrench into it. The last term,
Just one.
the last term, he's a lame duck. So he can do anything he wants to. He's not worried about getting reelected.
You only have one term, though, right?
In one term. Everyone has.
But then you just sit back and wait for the $180,000 paycheck and your pension and hey.
But how much different is that than what half the people are doing now?
If so,
Well, it's not.
Let me answer this. Let me try and answer this. If we know that the term limit is 8 or 10 years, then we're going to have some sort of idea how productive this member of Congress has been before his last term. Okay? And if he hasn't been very productive, then he doesn't deserve that last term. It's as simple as that.
Well, okay, but
Who defines productive? And
if he has an agenda, look, if I'm elected, I go to Congress now, balance budget, what the hell is that all about? Did I say that? You define how well I've done my job.
well, just
Oh, that's what your
that
elections
document
are.
right there. That's how you define whether you've done your job or not.
Or
But
constitutional or not.
as far as the lame duck guy goes, he's going to have a record. If we establish it's 8 or 10 years, we're going to have an idea how that last session is going to go. Okay, if he does something really bad, let's impeach him. Okay?
Well, I have a better solution for you. Get rid of the 17th Amendment and have
Yeah,
senators
at least the
appointed
senators.
the way they used to be, so
Yeah,
when
by
they
state legislature.
are not voting the way the state wants them to, we would call them.
That's something that we could look at, but I would say this. Do you really think that the Arizona State Legislature in all its glory might be the best?
Better than Congress.
It's better than Congress.
I know where Jeff Dial lives.
To select, yeah, but to select our senator, do you really think this Arizona State legislature is a better body than the informal electorate?
No.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because
Yes,
no,
I do.
I don't because their perspective in federal government is they're jealous guardians of their state rights.
That's right.
And by nature, this is where greed is good. If I can quote that wonderful movie, greed is good, jealousy is good. Make these people every competition is good. Anything that promotes competition is where we get better off, even in the long run. Maybe not even in the short run. But the whole philosophy of our senators was to protect the states' rights. When I watch these documentaries about nullification, states' rights, states implementing gold and silver coins as transactional material. These are the things that their senators have to promote because their state legislatures are actually promoting that. And if he doesn't do that, he won't see another day in office. And that's one of the many things that I like about the Constitution and that relationship.
That's
of
fair. That's fair. But how many people in our state legislature right now are really holding the states' rights?
Well, they don't
Not
because
enough.
it's been taken out of their hands, and not enough. But it's true. But just like you said, something like that doesn't take. So that philosophy. If people knew that they had more control, I believe if state legislators knew more about their rights and for example, when we watch this documentary on nullification, so many states have nullified a lot of 3 or 4 different issues that the federal government was the gold and silver, Obamacare, the Real ID. What was the other one? The marijuana, medical marijuana. once you promote, I believe, enough of that philosophy through education with people with grassroots who pressure their legislatures to develop that philosophy that, look, if you don't stand up for your state, you know what? You're not going to have a state. You're going to be an administrator of the federal state.
That's a great argument, but we're not there right now, are we?
No, we're not, but we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. Okay.
We are definitely
It's
getting
a great
there.
argument, but again, honestly, is that a priority for me? Not
No,
yet.
but it's just a discussion.
It's a great discussion to have. It's a great discussion to have. But hey, look, in my other life I carry a gun. I got to be good with a gun in my other life, or else I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Yeah.
But do I think it's a good idea to have guns on ASU?
Why not?
Well, you know what? I think college kids do a lot of stupid things. A lot of people do stupid things. But I think you infuse. This is my
Most
personal
people
opinion.
died at the hands of the state than they did in college on campus.
I'm not saying
Exactly.
I'm not saying that's not true, but I'm giving you my personal opinion. And I believe in gun rights. I believe in gun ownership, but I think you have a very volatile mix with young people, full of hormones, full of alcohol, perhaps. Everything else goes in the mix, and then you put guns on campus.
But how does the law change that? No, I mean, they could
It doesn't encourage it.
they can break the law right now and
Sure, they
take
can break
guns.
it. Absolutely, and it's broken all the time.
I'm sure.
But it's not. But we're not going to encourage that because the flip side of that is this: all these anti-gun people. See, we told you. That hurts us more than helps us when we have that tragedy.
Right.
I believe it gives
morality.
We're
You
having
can't.
tragedies anyway.
But you could say the same thing about the drug war. It's the same argument. You
Yeah.
know, well, why should they be decriminalized? Well, it's going to encourage people to do heroin and all this stuff, which is not true. So the same argument applies to guns.
Yeah, but right now,
It's not going to encourage people to buy guns just so they can carry them on campus.
Right now, I think there are more people than we could imagine want to take the Second Amendment away. Okay, and I don't want to give. I don't want to
That's
give.
the next step.
I don't want to give them any extra ammunition, no pun intended, to do that. And I think when you have guns, when you're able to have guns on a college campus with young minds, with hormonal rage, with alcohol, and all the stuff that goes along with the drama on college campuses, I think we're asking for a problem. And that problem will it'll be magnified perhaps beyond what it is. But it won't do the Second Amendment any good. That's my opinion.
But is it constitutional for them to prohibit on public property people from carrying weapons? If you can do it on the sidewalk outside of the university, why can't you do it on the public property that is a university or the community college?
That's a good argument. That's a good argument. Is it unconstitutional? I mean, a concealed weapon. Does the Constitution talk about a concealed weapon?
No, it's a state-invented idea.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some common sense, in my humble opinion. I think that's a law that come back and bite us. We really believe in our gun rights, and that gives more ammunition to the other side to say, hey, see, we told you. We told you. Yes, sir.
First of all, I just want to say, commend you on the fact that we're here standing up to our grilling pretty well. I think it's awesome that you're doing this.
I've been shot at.
Yeah.
You packing?
Not tonight. But can I ask a question, just like since we're on the topic of Second Amendment? What do you believe the philosophical purpose of the Second Amendment is? Is it hunting? Is it self-defense? Or is it defense against tyranny?
Why didn't all the above?
Okay, but which one of them was their main reason? Did they put in?
Probably tyranny.
Okay.
Have you been overseas?
So I have not.
Most countries don't allow.
Well, I mean, I was not in the military. I've been to that form.
Forget the military. Japan, England, those.
I agree with you. I think that is the reason for this. Okay, so the state has guns. People are being continually regulated to the point that we cannot. We're not allowed to carry them in certain places. We live in a great gun state. Arizona is a fantastic Second Amendment state. But, California, not a great Second Amendment state. And I have a lot of friends there that I care deeply about. So, if the purpose of the Second Amendment is to defend against tyranny, and then we are saying we have to have common sense and we can't allow people to have these guns in certain places, do you really honestly believe that when the time comes for the state to impose its will on the people, that they're going to put out a 30-day notice? I mean, of course not. Well, so isn't it then important that people have firearms when and where they need them? And shouldn't that be, not only the Second Amendment, but the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution should dictate when that is?
So back to when and where, why are they needed on a college campus?
Why
To
can't
be able to take care of the guy that comes on campus and starts shooting people.
Right.
The police aren't gonna do it.
More kids get killed in gun-free zones, which was on campuses of schools, than in gun shows.
That's right.
Because guys with guns that want to cause trouble don't go to gun shows to shoot.
I didn't come here to suck up to you guys. We disagree, okay?
I don't want you to suck up with me. I would respect you more.
I'm giving you my
I know a lot of
personal
politicians
opinion.
that will.
I'm giving you my personal opinion, and you've got some great arguments, but personally, I'm not going to agree with it. I'll apologize if I need to, but that's as far as I'm going to go. My personal belief is young minds, volatile minds, hormonal rage, alcohol, and whatever other stresses are on college campuses, that's a very toxic environment to be carrying guns. That's my personal opinion.
You know that in Israel they used to not allow guns on school campuses, and they continually had terrorists going in there and shooting up kids. Well,
who weren't even
guess what?
going to school.
They changed their mind. They put guns on the campuses. That did away with the terrorists coming in there because they were ready for them.
Well, I mean, they must be better shots than the average kid here. I don't know. I didn't know that. I did not. Yes, sir.
I think we're kind of getting off topic. I agree with you. Agree to disagree. I don't disagree with what you're saying, by the way, but getting back to the debt, which I feel is the most important issue in mind, I don't agree with that in this room. What are your tactics for getting other people to agree with you that this really is a crisis, that we need to solve this, not 10 years from now, but this year? Now, what are your plans to make other people see that this is a crisis?
Thank you. I think it's a public record, those that are elected. I think it's a public record, those that run will be newly elected. And I think it's a very public forum. Say, you know what, you ran on this, you're elected, you ran on this. In your first or second term, you've talked about this. Now it's time to come together. A public display of affection, okay? Out these people who said they may not have done it. My friend David Schweiker had some very good conversations about the debt and deficit spending.
Right.
Okay? Some other people have as well. But now it's time to be very vocal because we don't have time to talk much longer.
Hit the iceberg, right? So
Well, I hope it hasn't hit the iceberg, but we're certainly heading that direction.
I think it did.
It might have. It might have. But my strategy is this. When I say find like-minded individuals, there's a public record. People got elected.
I'm just saying there may not be a lot of like-minded individuals in there with you.
You know, we create the sense of urgency.
No.
The best you do is create the sense of urgency. What do we really have any choice? Any other choice? What we're doing isn't working. And you know what? That goes back to the constituents as well. That goes back to everybody, not just the elected person. That goes back to everybody. What else?
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think Ron Paul actually introduced a bill that would talk about nullifying debt with the federal government. He did. He did? Okay, I just make sure I keep the light on here. The second thing, how would you describe the economy the United States has at this point?
The economy? How would I describe it?
Yeah, how would you
It's not working very well. It's overregulated. It's overtaxed. There's no
Is
incentive.
it free market? Is it demand economy?
How's it free market if there's subsidies for different types of industry? Okay, it's not working. And again, kind of what we're talking about, maybe it wasn't you and I specifically, but a bigger conversation. I was trying to think, based on my frame of reference from Chandler, lowering the secondary income tax to get Intel to come in here and manufacture. It worked. That's my experience. It worked. But guess what? It's still broken. So why do we even think about tweaking, a tax structure we already know is broken? Why not get more radical? Because what's happening, what's in place right now isn't working. Why not be bold about this thing? Is it going to happen with freshman congressmen? Probably not. But it doesn't stop you from being bold. It doesn't stop you from answering or asking the questions. It doesn't stop the Craig Barretts of the world who've been there, done it, and say, you know what? It is a better solution. It does repatriate money and jobs and investment back to the United States. And the whole energy thing. We are dependent on foreign oil. We know that. We've gone to wars we don't admit we've gone to wars for to secure that world price for oil. Okay? Well, guess what? If we look at this exploration and production in the United States, we create jobs. We repatriate money, and we're less dependent on foreign oil. I mean, that's a start. It's not an absolute solution, but it's a start. Did you miss something in your notes, sir?
Could you know, a lot of these things are state issues. You know, they don't belong at the federal level.
Right.
There's a lot that doesn't belong at the federal level.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Could you share your thoughts with us on the recent state convention?
I was there. Were you there?
I was. Yep.
Well, I was accused of being part of the disruptive crowd that,
As was I.
yeah. In fact, we went
Detained by
to,
the sheriff's deputies.
you were detained?
I was detained.
Were they bigger than you?
He was much smaller than me, which scared me even more because I was afraid he was gonna
Pays you, bro.
Yeah. He was getting real anxious.
Yeah. Well, what happened is this. You know, I think it was probably bad form for the folks to boo Romney's son. Emotions got high. It was appropriate for him to say, vote for this slate? No, it wasn't appropriate. It was probably bad form to boo the guy. Emotions were high, and not just because Arizona, but what's happening all over the place. I'd say God bless people for their passion. But the fallout is that anybody who's a Ron Paul guy, or anybody who was at the state convention that was remotely close to Ron Paul are part of the problem. Rather than the state Republican Party in Arizona saying, you know what, we're lame. This shouldn't have lasted 9.5 hours, or however long it lasted. Rather than them taking the blame, they'd rather blame the Ron Paul people. I was in D.C. when was this today? Friday? Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I met with the senators, I met with some other people there. They'd all heard about it. They weren't there, but they heard about it. And granted, you know, neither one of our senators are a big fan of Ron Paul's.
Yeah.
Nor are they big fans of the state party. They weren't there, but they're running off rumors, okay, and what they've seen on a few YouTube clips. And it's unfortunate because the stain isn't on the state party, as lame as it is. It's on the Ron Paul delegation. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. So I think it's always going to be incumbent when you're not part of the mainstream to always play above the rim and encourage other people to do the same thing. Because we're not set up for success right now. And any detractor that may not be something that the Ron Paul folks actually did, they're still going to get blamed for it. It's almost like the facts don't matter. It's tough.
I think it's absolutely like the facts don't matter.
It's tough.
When we were assaulted, well, I wasn't personally, but Ron Paul's supporters were assaulted physically. There were
I was assaulted?
Yeah.
There is very strong evidence of electioneering happening on many different levels by a guy who's been, you know, severely indicted and looked at for electioneering in the past.
Well, hopefully we got to bring that out. My corollary to that is this. I was in D.C. The first part of the week. Zach went to a Tempe Republican Women's Forum that we were invited to, set up a table. And as soon as he got there, they ran to him and said, oh, where's Sepulveda? He's not here? Well, no. You were part of that Ron Paul group. You're disruptive. Take your table down. Is that what they said?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't matter that we don't have a nominee. It doesn't matter that Ron Paul's still standing. What matters is that Ron Paul people have got this bad reputation, and in the Republican hierarchy, or not even the hierarchy, but these clubs that support republicanism in the state said, hey, you're part of the problem. Get out of here. Well, that's pathetic. And the woman who I've known for a lot of years, Linda Wegan, I don't know if you guys know her. She ran for the state legislature, very qualified woman, didn't win. I mean, that's why, a few years back. She doesn't agree with me and Ron Paul. She's not a Ron Paul supporter. But the bigger issue is she's been part of that club for 20 years. And the rules they put in place didn't exist. And she was embarrassed that they went to that level and made stuff up because they could, I guess. And the takeaway was, how is this club any better than other wacky clubs that the Democrats have, that the Libertarians have, that everybody else has? They're not. But what's unfortunate is this. Ron Paul folks have been blamed for stuff that they didn't do. And I guess the takeaway is we just got to be better citizens. Because the facts don't really matter, do they?
Let me ask you a political question. Since none of this is
Sure, go ahead.
How are you going to beat the Democrat in this district? And who is it going to be?
I'm the only guy that can beat the
Who
Democrat.
do you think it's going to be?
I don't care what it is. I don't know. I don't care. They both raise a lot more money than me. I know that. Hey, I've created jobs.
Okay,
That's
not the question.
Let me answer this. I'm qualified. I've been elected in this district twice. I've balanced a budget in this district. I have created jobs. Those sound bites aren't sound bites. I've done those things. Okay? I was born and raised here. You know, I can appeal to a blue-collar guy who may not be a Republican. I can certainly appeal to people who've left the Republican Party and that are independents. Right now it's a third, a third, a third.
Right.
And the reason the independents are a third is because they've left the Republican Party for the most part. They're tired of all this crap. These rules that are made up. I can appeal to those people. I'm a real guy. And the Republicans, I'm sorry, well, there are a couple of Republicans. The Democrats are very liberal. It's about jobs and the economy. It's not about Kirsten Sinema's, what is it, LGBT, lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender. You know, as an aside, LGB, that means laser guided bomb in my world. I didn't realize it meant something else. That's a true story. You know, so that's not the issue. It's jobs and the economy. What has she done? She hasn't.
Well, she's done everything she can to destroy it.
But yes, sir. But the point is, focus on jobs and the economy. She's not done that. Charity's not done that. Shapira hasn't done that. I don't care what flavor of American you are, Republican, Democrat, Independent, it's jobs and the economy. I can speak that because I've done that. I've balanced budgets that deal with jobs and the economy in this district. So I quite frankly don't care who it is. Okay. And you know, look at my counterparts on the Republican side. I'm not sure if they have that background.
Well, Parker spent a lot of time in the executive level of government. You know, Jeff Thompson.
That's got to count for something.
Yeah. You got 2 cents, Jeff? Jeff Thompson? He's a business owner. What's his name? Travis owns his own airplane business.
Well, it's his family.
And then Leah's been in the CIA, so.
I like Leah. I think she's kind of put a sanity to this debate. But again, unfortunately, I don't think she has a base. I think she's...
I'm very hesitant about voting for anybody with the acronym CIA in the back of their name. Why don't you just put NAZI in the back of your name?
Yeah. Well, like I said, Robert, I don't think she has a base. Okay? I think she has infused some reality. I don't think you run to the crowd, play the crowd with fear tactics, like some of the candidates are. I think we're smart to realize that probably if there's a nuclear weapon that's going to come to the United States, it won't be coming from the Mexican border. Why? Because they're expensive. They're pretty easy to trap and detect. And if I'm a bad guy, am I going to risk blowing up Nogales or Douglas or maybe the Port of LA or the Port of Houston or the Port of Manhattan with a nuclear device? But that stuff sells. Fear sells. But I don't want any part of that. Telling you I'm going to cut 5 agencies is popular. But I'd be lying because I don't have that experience. I'll defer those that do. I'll be reasonable. But I can't tell you with absolute certainty I'm going to cut this agency, that agency, and this other agency. I'd be lying. I wouldn't be truthful.
I think what you need to say is, I'm going to adhere to the Constitution, and that's going to resonate with people more and more and more. And that's really what we're looking for. I don't think we're looking for somebody that's going to go there and promise that he's going to do away with the EPA. He can't do that. He can certainly vote to do away with the EPA.
Right. And the end state that I'm going to get to, as I said earlier, is at some point in time, as it uses 5 years, to go back to those constitutionally mandated departments. Right. And but it may not include the post office. Okay? So, all right. How are your notes going?
It's been interesting.
Well, it'd be boring. Well, did we touch everything?
I think we did a really good job. So.
Do you think that the communists are extending this country still? That's a good question.
The communist.
Are they around in this country? Are they still working in this country? Are they in the
communism
State Department
died.
like they have been? Do you think that
Maybe
we ought to
they-
be? Do you think that we ought to be having Russian troops come over here and
That's a
Train.
train with our?
Those
troops
are
in
those
Colorado?
UN resolutions and NATO, not NATO, but
No.
This is strictly Russia and us, not NATO.
Okay, multilateral military training is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they're coming in Colorado.
Yep.
It's all set up.
Yep.
They're gonna learn our tactics, they're gonna learn our chain of command, they're gonna learn our weapons, if they don't already know them, which they probably do. They're gonna know our tactics.
TTPs, that's never a good thing. I would question that. I would make it I'd be very vocal about that. How does it benefit us?
Are they our allies?
They say they are. I was in Coatesville, guess what? They weren't really friendly over there. Okay? We do train with other troops all the time, but I guess the question that you're asking is, does it benefit us? I don't know how it would.
Is communism dead?
Well, it's not, it smells bad. No, of course it's not dead. Do you kill, let's go back to the war on terror. Let's go back to Al-Qaeda. We've killed all these upper echelon people, so it's going to go away? No, it's an ideology. If the Pope of Rome was killed tomorrow, does Catholicism go away?
nope.
Absolutely not. And so I think it's foolhardy to think that we can attract the leadership and the ideology is going to go away. That doesn't happen.
Never
Communism isn't dead. Socialism isn't dead. None of that's dead.
All you have to do is look at Washington.
Yeah,
See what's happening
it's alive and well.
On these specific things, yeah, you got to bring that to light and ask the questions. Apples and oranges. My first term on the Chandler City Council after the roundup, which cost us a lot of heartache. Okay, the comment was that, gee, we stopped 438. Well, we got 438 illegal immigrants. What's your problem? Well, we stopped several thousand Americans, get 438, plus there's no probable cause, there's no due process. It was terrible. It was terrible. But then right after that, after that thing settled down, then the former chief of police had a training scenario with a Marine Corps unit to do some counterterrorism type stuff in downtown Chandler. It was stupid. Why would you do that? So my point is, it didn't make sense. You question those things, and guess what? It didn't happen. It didn't need to happen. If something is crazy that we're training alongside with Russian troops in the United States of America, I'd ask, what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? And then bring attention to it and maybe stop it. But the best we can do is bring attention to those things and ask the questions.
I just wondered if you were aware that that's number one.
I'm where we train all the time. When I was in Germany, we sent troops to Georgia to train with the Georgians who used to be Russians and now are Georgians again.
You know, it's to bring it down to a local level. Are you aware that on Halloween night,
Oh, yeah.
that the federal marshals accompanied local police going around checking convicted sex offenders to make sure they weren't passing out candy to the kids? Federal marshals working with the local police. Now, I can understand working with them to solve a crime that they don't have the resources with which to solve that crime. But going around doing that, that's really dangerous.
Preventive, yeah.
What it's doing is it's encouraging the federal government to work with our local people.
That's the same thing happened in Chandler Roundup. The police department invited the Border Patrol at that time. There was no ICE, there was no Homeland Security. The Border Patrol in to ride along with them to get all these undocumented workers off the streets.
It just gives the general public the exposure to seeing federal military people in your local neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And they do it incrementally until you wind up having a police state, and you're like, gosh, I just thought this was
I'm
just
no one's hero, but I saw that and I said no. I said no. I took a lot of grief for that because I was the crazy liberal on that council who didn't like the roundup. It didn't matter that it was unconstitutional, violate Americans' rights. Okay, it didn't matter. What the paper said was one thing. What I said was another thing. It didn't matter. But guess what? You stick to your guns. It was a lonely time for me. a brand new elected guy in this town that wasn't nearly as big as it is today, say this is wrong. Well, who are you? You an attorney? No. Why do I need to be an attorney to know that you violated that guy's civil rights? It was lonely, but it doesn't matter. You stick to your guns. When this thing came up with joint training with the Marine Corps, our police, our SWAT team in downtown, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Not here. Go out to, well, go up to Desert Breeze. That wouldn't have been any good. Go out to, Williams Air Force Base, or the old base there. And it stopped. It stopped because there's no need to do that. I've traveled all over the world, and in these places we call democracies, they're not. Korea isn't. Japan isn't. Germany really isn't. Germany's one of the most militarized countries I know. And they don't own guns. They have to check out guns if they go hunting. So it's just crazy. So we can't give up. We can't give up anything, and we have to ask questions. And again, it's incumbent on everybody, not just the elected official, everybody. Why does this make sense? Why are we doing this? Right.
Have you heard of the Rex 84 camps and the FEMA camps?
Yeah.
That's very disconcerting.
It is.
500,000 FEMA coffins spread out in 2 or 3 different locations in the state of Arizona.
There's 2 or 3 in Arizona.
2 or 3 locations where they have separated about 540,000 FEMA coffins. One's at the cemetery in North Phoenix, and others in and the other one is in Casa Grande, and there's another one supposed to be, maybe Sierra Vista was a Casa Grande I heard of.
I heard Sierra Vista.
Where they're using
I don't have, Robert, I don't have the
the
answer to that. Doesn't feel good though, does it?
I just hope that,
I don't have the answer to that. But again, we've got to ask questions. And these big fusion centers that everybody gets to operate in, these command and control centers.
Like the one in Salt Lake, their building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, look, we've all got to be aware of these things and ask questions. But again, a lot of distractors out there. So all I could say, going back to the Congress of the United States, I would give you my priorities and hope those would make sense to get elected. And right now, it's a balanced budget amendment. Second to that is a question these guys always want to go to war. Why? You go answer to that is, okay, incrementally, let's figure out what this Fed thing's all about. Let's educate more people with an audit at first. Okay? And then figure out how to get away with this thing, or do away with this thing. Lessen our dependence on foreign oil. Produce here, explore here, produce here. Bring those jobs back. Look, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, but we're not doing anything unless it's prioritized. And a guy that gets elected, he needs all the help by the people elected to continue to bring this, shed light on these things.
George Washington said, truth will ultimately prevail when there is pains taken to bring it to light. And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that we're working out there educating people so that they understand what's being done to them. Because people don't understand what's happening to them. They're so interested in sitting on that couch and watching the booze and drinking their beer.
Don't forget Facebook.
They're happy. So we need to make people uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, I've made a lot of people uncomfortable.
Flick the comfortable.
Well, it spoils the party when you point these things down.
Oh, it does.
It makes it more lively.
Yeah. We wanted to thank you, Martin, for coming out and spending time with us tonight.
Thanks for taking our arrows for 2 hours.
That's a lot of arrows.
It's okay, I've been in worse situations. I'm sure.
If you wanted unintelligent constituents, you'd be a Democrat, right? So, I'm just kidding.
I know some smart Democrats. Yeah. No.
My wife is a smart Democrat.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.